Welcome back, nieces and nephews, to JEWAP, which stands for Just Everything with Auntie Pookie podcast. I'm your host, Sydney, or as many know me as Auntie Pookie. Happy Black History Month. Today I'm going to talk about Langston Hughes, who was really amazing. He was born February 1st in Joplin, Missouri. He was raised by his maternal grandmother, Mary Sampson Patterson, Larry Langston. That is a long name. And she was 70 when Hughes was born, and he stayed with her until he was 13 years old. Then he moved to Lincoln, Illinois to live with his mother and her husband before they ended up settling in Cleveland. And when they were actually in Lincoln, Illinois, that's when Hughes began writing poetry, which I so love poetry. Shout out to everyone who writes poetry. He graduated from high school, and then he spent a year in Mexico where his father was located, and he went to a college called Columbia University. During that time, he worked as an assistant cook, a laundrier, and a busboy. He traveled to Africa and Europe while he was working as a seaman. In November of 1924, it's just crazy. I look at these dates and I'm just like, dang. But it's just dope. Anyways, he moved to Washington, D.C., and he wrote his first book of poetry, which was called The Weary Blues. And that was published by Alfred Knopf in 1926. He ended up finishing his college education at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania 3 years later. And in 1930, his first novel, Not Without Laughter, won the Harmon Gold Medal for a lecture. I remember reading Langston Hughes in English class 800 years ago. He wrote novels, short stories, plays, and poetry, and is also known for his engagement with the world of jazz and the influence it had on his writing, as in his book-length poem, Montage of the Dream Deferred. His life and his work were enormously important in the shaping of artistic contributions of the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s. Unlike some of the other notable poets of this time period, he refused to differentiate between his personal experience and the common experience of being Black in America. And he wanted to tell his stories to people in the ways that it reflected their actual culture, including their love of music, laughter, language, and sadly the suffering of all of the racism. In addition to having so much poetry and leaving so much poetry, he wrote 11 plays. Whoa. And countless other things of work, which are including the well-known simple books, Simple Uncle Sam, Simple Stakes a Claim, Simple Takes a Wife, Simple Speaks His Mind, The Poetry of Negro, which was in 1946 through 1949. And many more. He has wrote so many things. He actually died in 1967 because he had a complication with prostate cancer in New York City. That's where he passed. In his memory, his residence at 20 East 127th Street in Harlem has been given a landmark status by the New York City Preservation Commission. And the street has also been renamed as Langston Hughes Place. All right, one of his poems is called Harlem, and it's a really short one. I think it's really nice, and it's just very interesting. It says, "What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrup sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode?" That literally is a very short poem, but that is one of his poems. And I like it because it's like, what does happen to a dream when it's just a dream? It's just hanging out. It's just there. It's hanging out. Does it disappear out your brain? Whatever. But yeah, I think poetry is phenomenal. It can be romantic. It can be soothing. It can be all of those things. So I think, if you want to do poetry, do it. It's pretty dope. And that concludes another Black History educational experience. Thanks for tuning in.